Thank you, Professor Mitev, and thank you, professors, for all being here. Today, I want to talk about a topic that has been discovered 3 centuries ago, if not more, and found to be problematic, but yet no solution has been found. And why would I want to do that is because if you ask any finance professional, what's wrong with the finance industry right now, the clear answer would be, there is a cacophony of grievances and scandals and altering of financial statements. There is an addiction in manipulation of financial statements and reporting fake figures. There's fraud, there's greed, and there's money laundering. All this leads to earnings management. The thesis of the topic today is the impact of financial loss and distress on earnings management. My name is Badih KAZMA. I'm my thesis supervisor, Professor Mark Valax. Our agenda consists of 8 points. We start with earnings management, and we will end with the practical implications. In the Gulf Cooperation Council, referred to GCC, there are 6 states: Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman. The weak corporate governance codes and the lack of proper internal controls, coupled with poor accountability, absence of principles, morals, values, topped with a dash of dishonesty, have led executives to practice unethical earnings management. Research problem, the 3 whys: what, where, and why. What is the problem? As said, weaknesses in corporate governance and internal controls, along with the loopholes in the corporate policies and procedures, have led executives to outsmart the system and to practice earnings management. Really, they became super smart. Where is the problem? The problem lies in the heart of GCC listed firms. Why is it the problem? It's because earnings management is a problem. It's a curse, and it damages firms' reputation, destroys stakeholders, investors, creditors, and it can affect the overall economy, such as the case of Enron, Lehman Brothers, and now Evergrande, the recent case in China. Thesis objective, 4 points for our thesis objectives: to examine if executives in the GCC are practicing earning management. Second, to investigate the impact of financial loss, distress, and performance on earnings management practices. Third, to establish solutions and ethical responsibility matrix as a control mechanism to eliminate the link between executives' unethical behavior and earnings management practices. And fourth, to implement machine learning processes as a control mechanism to eliminate earning management practices. This will lead us to our research questions. Have executives in GCC listed companies been practicing earning management? Are executives practicing earnings management via discretionary positive or negative discretionary accruals? Does financial loss and distress performance issues have an impact on earnings management practices? And how can we change all this? Hypothesis testing. We came up with 10 hypotheses. The first 2 hypotheses, H1 and H2, related to the executive behavior and its relationship to earnings management practices. 3 and 4 are the financial loss and its significant and insignificant impact on earnings management practices. Financial distress, and this is on 5 and 6, financial distress and its impact, significant and insignificant impact on earnings management practices. 7 and 8, financial performance and the significant and insignificant impact on earnings management. And the final 9 and 10 are the consolidated loss, distress, and performance and its impact on earnings management practices. The research design and methodology: to find the results and to test our hypothesis, we have used quantitative analysis to measure the dependent and independent variable. First, I do want to thank Professor Gajewski for his feedback on the thesis in regards to the indigeneity problem. Very important feedback, and I have literally worked out the numbers to bring it back to the thesis. So to ensure that we have no indigeneity problem, so that we can, in order to make the right decisions in choosing the econometric model, we have applied the autocorrelation, heteroscedasticity, multicollinearity, and the Hostman test to our selected data. To test our dependent variable, which is the practice of earnings management, there's so many models, and there's so many models that has been used. over the years. The recent model configured by Professor Gajewski himself in Chapter 2, How to Better Detect Cases, it's a great model to detect earnings management practices in developed countries with advanced stock market system. However, it's not the case in the GCC, as still the software system and the stock market system in the GCC is not sophisticated enough. So for that case, we have used modified Jones model, which has been tested and used by other researchers to compute quantitative data for examining earnings management practices. We have picked 120 companies with 360 observations. Modified Jones models, it goes into 4 steps to calculate earnings management practices. So you have to go to step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4, and you cannot skip steps. So you have to finish step 1 to move to step 2, to steps 3, and to step 4 to calculate and finally the DACC, which is the earnings management practices. To calculate the independent variable, we have used the Pearson correlation analysis, various inflation factors, and the regression models, of course, to get the independent impact over the dependent variable, which we use the OLS, ordinary least square, and the EGLS and the GMM EGLS. For testing result, now that we have defined our problem, we have determined our objectives and questions, we have set our hypothesis, and we have tested our results. These are the company, and now I will take you through the test results and in this thesis. So we have, as I said, 120 firms and 360 observations. So to test for any indigenous problems, we ran the autocorrelation, the heteroscedasticity, and multicollinearity, and the Haussmann. In running these tests, we came across a heteroscedasticity error in Saudi Arabia, and UAE, we came across heteroscedasticity and autocorrelation error as well. I will show you how we changed models, regression models in the next slides. The remaining GCC countries test result had showed that there's no indigeneity problem. Thus, we have used the OLS regression and Kennedy adjust we used before. For testing results on the dependent variable, and that's a descriptive statistics, and that's when you run the modified Jones model, that's what we got. These are the results for executives practicing earnings management. So in looking at our results, we can see that in Saudi Arabia, 34% of the companies are practicing earning management, Kuwait 64%, Qatar 63%, and so forth. Now to note, all these countries are practicing earnings management, and they're practicing negative discretionary accrual. If you look at the mean value where it shows all of them are practicing negative discretionary accruals, except Kuwait, they are practicing positive discretionary accruals. In testing the independent variable, we went to the Pearson correlation analysis, and the Pearson correlation is used to check the relationship between the dependent and the independent variables, and the independent variables together to see if there's any correlation error in between. So we have tested our results, and it shows that we have no errors. So we moved forward. As you can see, if the figures came between 0 and 0.5, so we are fine, we can move forward. If it's between 0.5 and 0.9, then we have an issue. Then we have to stop and think, what's the next steps? The various inflation factors as well. It measures the correlation among the independent variables. And as you can see, if anything in the linearity, multicollinearity, and autocorrelation above 10, then we have an issue. And as you can see, all our numbers came below 10, so we are fine and good to go. As far as the heteroscedasticity and the autocorrelation, as I mentioned earlier, KSA and UAE came out to be that we have errors. So on this side, you can see on KSA, the probability chi-square was below 0.05. So it shows that we have error, and UAE as well, 0.004, and on the consolidated figures as well. We moved to the regression analysis, and that's where we computed the independent over the dependent variable, which is the second step to investigate the financial loss, distress, and performance over earnings management practices to see if there's an impact on it. So if you look at the far left, where the Durbin-Watson is, if Durbin-Watson is below 2 or above 2, then we have an issue, and then we will change the regression model. Now, we ran this before we did the indigeneity problem, and then we came across Qatar was 1.3, And that's why we use the EGLS method to compute better results. But if you look at the numbers, UAE, as we said, 3.4. So UAE had a problem with Darwin-Watson. It has a problem with heteroscedasticity, and it has a problem with the autocorrelation. So we shifted and we used both methods, the EGLS method and the GMM EGLS method. Thus, for that reason, we have computed the figures. And on the right side, if you look at the significant, insignificant, and the accept hypothesis, so on the financial loss, distress, and financial performance, these are the figures that were computed. And looking at these figures, we can confirm that in Saudi Arabia, financial distress has an impact on earnings management practices. In Kuwait, it does not have, so it doesn't have an impact on, it is insignificant. In Qatar, financial loss has a significant impact. Bahrain, financial loss. UAE, financial distress, and consolidated financial distress and financial performance has an impact on earnings management practices. Now that we have defined the problem and computed the results, and we have computed the actual results that we have, we jump to our questions that we went into the thesis. Have executives in GCC listed companies been practicing earning management? Are executives practicing earnings management via positive and negative discretionary accrual? Regarding testing, if executives are engaged, yes, we can confirm, and it is concluded from the test results that executives in the 6 GCC countries are practicing earnings management through positive and negative discretionary accruals. The above results answers our first and second question and accept our hypothesis. Now, on the third question, does financial loss, distress, and performance has an impact on earnings management? If we look back in the previous slide, on a consolidated level, yes, it does have an impact on earnings management. On an individual country-by-country basis, yes, it does. And that accepts our hypothesis H3, H5, H7, and H9. Now, how could we change earnings management? On the fourth question, this will be answered in the next slide. The recommendation. Now, what do we recommend? Now, I understand earnings management is a big problem, and it has been done for and is being implemented forever in the GCC and everywhere in the world. But our recommendation, we recommend and encourage regulators to work collaboratively with other ministries and local concerned parties. In other words, to be all one hand and to work together in being as strong as they can be. Yes, corporate governance in the GCC is not hasn't been that old. It's only 20 years, the maximum. So we recommend external auditor procedures to be strictly implemented, first. Second, for listed companies to hire 2 big auditor firms. Third, internal audit function to report directly to the audit committee, and the audit committee to be elected by the board, not elected by the owner or the shareholder or the CEO, where the WASTA, I know this, you know that, so let me call him, he's my friend from college. This is what's causing all these problems, is because it's still, I know this person, let's bring him on board. And that's causing problems because no one can do anything about it. So corporate governance needs to be strictly controlled, and the regulator and external auditors should all the time have visibility over companies' financials, not just only when the interim audit started or at year end. No, what I'm talking is monthly. It's important for them to monitor what's happening. I've been in the market, and I am in the market, and I know how they work. The second part, which is the ethical responsibility matrix, GCC listed companies should establish an ethical responsibility matrix, and executives should adhere by these matrices. It's very, very, very important for them to adhere by the ethical responsibility, the legal responsibility, and the economic responsibility. And if an executive chose not to follow any of those steps in any company, then punishment should be enacted. It's the same thing as Sarbanes-Oxley in America. When before Sarbanes-Oxley, it was everybody's doing whatever he wants to do or she wants to do. But then after Sarbanes-Oxley, because the CEO, CFO are signing on a certificate, and if they did something, manipulated the figures, although the figures were wrong, after that, then definitely they will be imposed to jail. So this is the second part. And finally is the machine learning, which I truly believe that machine learning is the key and should be the key for eliminating and reducing earnings management practices, because it can be used as a control mechanism to detect fraud and to ensure error-free embezzlement. It can replace a human by machines and will reduce manual manipulation by allowing the machines to do the work of accountants. Because remember one thing, fraud happens at the bottom, not at the top. The order will come from the top to the bottom to tell them change this or move that. But the executive doesn't do things in his own hand. No, they will put the order, and then the accountants or finance managers, that's when they manipulate the figures. By implementing machine learnings, this will control this aspect, and then the machine will record the data in the correct format. It will categorize the transactions, reconcile the accounts, track changes in any expenses, and most importantly, it will streamline the audit processes and procedures, and you can apply corporate governance and internal controls to it. At the end, we do believe, and in conclusion, we believe that artificial intelligence and machine learning, along with the solution provided, if implemented correctly, will be the ultimate solutions for eliminating earnings management practices in GCC listed companies. Thank you.